The project planning approach. The planning approach formulates the strategies to achieve the project objectives. It also arranges or creates the means required to achieve the goals and defines how the project is implemented, monitored, controlled, and closed. The planning approach is the identification and selection of the best approach, the best methodology to plan, implement, and monitor the project. As a project manager, it will help you answer the questions when you're planning in terms of why we need to do the things, where we're going to work, when we're going to do the work, how we're going to do it, what we're going to use, and who's going to be responsible for that work. One of the elements in defining the planning priorities in the planning approach is to identify how each one of the project management plans will contain a level of detail. Depending on your project, the level of complexity, the level of risk, the size of your project, the experience of your project team, and the constraints that were identified in the project, you might identify that you have different levels of detail needed for each one of the areas of project management. In this example, we see a simple chart that you can use, ranking from 0 to 5, 5 meaning that I need full complete details of my plans. And in the example, we see that the budget and the contract areas, the budget and contract management plans, will need more detail than the other areas. One of the reasons could be that the donor has a lot of requirements and that's a difficult project. And that's why you need to put more effort and time to develop plans that are more complete. On the other extreme, you might find the team or information are areas that don't need much detail in the plans. And one of the reasons could be that you have a team that has a lot of experience and the level of information is not that significant in the project. The next step is to start preparing the planning sessions. That means that as a project manager, you need to look at the schedule and prepare a meeting calendar because you're going to have many sessions. It's not going to be just one day where you prepare all the plans. You may need even a couple of weeks to complete all the plans. So prepare your meeting calendar and agenda on the planning sessions. You also need to identify subject matter experts. These are people within the organization or even in consultants that can bring their experience during the planning sessions. They bring a wealth of information in terms of what they know about planning for projects that are similar to you. And they can also be used for the planning sessions to bounce some ideas that the project might have in terms of how to manage different elements of the plans. You also need to distribute some of the project information to the participants so they become familiar before the session. You don't start wasting too much time during the planning sessions explaining what is the project. You also need to obtain plans and lessons learned from previous projects. They can be used as a reference during the sessions that the team can relate to and they can look at as examples of what successful projects did to plan certain areas of the project. So your planning sessions are going to be done in a couple of sessions where maybe even one session could be dedicated just to one plan. Depending on the level of detail, you will be able to organize your calendar. Let's look at a little bit about our planning phase. In the project, we identified the planning phase as going through this cycle in which there's a lot of effort happening during the phases between initiation and implementation. The planning sessions usually happen within this time. They're going to be happening right here, and that means that's the effort you need to put in to develop the plans. The areas here is when you're going to be continuously improving your plans based on the information you get from the implementation and monitoring phases. That's going to be the time you're going to be spending with your team to make adjustments, to make improvements to your plans. But the actual plans will usually happen within that area. And it's an important phase. Sometimes we don't put that much attention and effort to look at our plans, and we just try to implement the project right away. There are many dangers to do that. One of them is that you might find out that during implementation, a lot of the ideas or plans that you develop in a rush are becoming more of difficult to manage. So it's important to spend some good time to look at the plans, develop good plans, and also helps the team have a better understanding and better grasp of what the project is. The next step in that process is that you need to identify the templates, procedures, and tools to develop all the project plans. Depending on the amount of data and the detail you need, you may need even specified software to manage, for example, your schedule and your budget. And if needed and required, you may also need to train your team in the use of the templates and the tools. Now, that could be a good opportunity for the team to get also not only train on the use of the tools, but also use the information from the project to apply to those tools. So it could be a part of a session of training and developing plans. You also need to define the process to develop and approve all the project plans. It doesn't need to be complex, but the idea that there has to be a quality check on your plans to make sure you're not missing anything important. The planning method will depend on the type of project. An adaptive project that is at the top level here, or a traditional project will be on the other extreme. An adaptive project means it's participatory, means that you need to bring in more people and stakeholders to participate in the planning sessions. It is cyclical, meaning that you're constantly adapting it. It's results oriented. There's more focus on what are going to be the outputs that the team needs to produce, phase plans, and it's a learning and discovery process, because it could be that your project is something very new and there's not much experience about what we need to do, that the learning and discovery of the process of implementing helps you identify opportunities to improve your plans. On the other extreme, when you have a traditional project that has no risk, it's not complex, it's relatively small, then it's not participatory, meaning that you can do the project plans. It's mostly activity oriented, looking at the tasks that need to be completed. The focus will be to complete all the plans. There is no need to constantly adapting them or upgrading them. And mostly the idea is the focus on command and control. Where you are in this spectrum, depending on the information and what you know about your project, you may be able to choose it. If you decide that your project is right here, then it's mostly going to have some of these elements around here with some pieces of this area. Again, you decide in terms of where you are in your project, what type of information you have, and what is going to be your planning method. Most of the time, you're going to be around this area, as they provide you some of the advantages of having opportunities for learning and the participatory approach on planning. One of the themes we're going to be talking in this course is that there is a planning cycle. The goal is not just to complete your plans and have them 100% ready before implementation, is that because there's a lot that you're going to be learning while you're implementing your plans. And second, some of the assumptions and the risks are going to be happening in the project are going to be changing. That means that no matter how good your plans are, by the time you're implementing, you're going to see there are changes that force you to make modifications. So the idea is that you plan, you try to complete your plans. They don't need to be 100%, it could be 80% complete. And with that information, you start doing your work. And while you're implementing, you're doing the work, you check the progress, you try to see the variances between what you plan and what is actually happening. And on that information, you take an action. You adapt the plans, you improve your plans, so that in the next phase, you incorporate those lessons, you incorporate what you've learned, and you're able to improve your plan, so they get closer and closer to being complete. And that is the idea. It is a cycle that happens many times during the project life cycle, and you don't need to wait until the end of the project to adapt or modify or make improvements. You can do it on every 3 months, every 6 months, depending on the length and the complexity of your project. But the idea is that planning is the concept. It's not just developing a plan, but a process of planning through the life of the project. And the closer you get to the end of the project, then the less you're going to need to start making changes and updates. But at the early stages, that's when it's needed. Because you don't know much about what's going to happen in the project, there is a need to be flexible in your approach for planning.